before it's the Church Solutions Podcast. My name is Phil Thompson. This is episode number 522. And my co-host, Steve Lacey, is not here today, but he will be back. He's doing some other things behind the scenes. This is brought to you by streamingchurch.tv, which is part of our family here, part of our company here. And that's Steve's actually doing a lot of work behind the scenes with streamingchurch.tv. So I'm flying solo here, but not really. I'm not solo because I have a great guest today, which we will get into here in a moment. But again, we're a company, streamingchurch.tv is a company, and Church Solutions, our podcast here that you're listening or watching, is part of that. And if we can help you in any way, not just with tech stuff, but other things, all of us involved in this company have been involved in ministry for pretty much all our adult lives, which is hard to believe. But so that's why one of the reasons we do these podcasts, and it's not always tech related. And today is not necessarily tech related, I guess, but it's a very important topic. So I think it is anyhow. And I think I think evidence shows that is true. So let's just jump into it. Let me introduce our next guest. She has been a QuickBooks expert since the day Intuit released their very first DOS version back in the dark ages of 1992. And I remember using that as an executive pastor. In fact, Intuit has, I think, they have some support here in Tucson. But anyhow, we'll move on here. So today, our guest helps churches and ministries with their books, helps them understand financial reports, helps create wise stewardship decisions. That's part, I messed that all up, but you know what I'm getting at. She is the founder of Good Steward Church Academy. She is on a mission to impact 10,000 churches because when churches handle their money with integrity, they really do free themselves up to reach more people for God's glory. And so she brings decades of technical expertise in this area. She's got a great heart for ministry and a very rare ability to make financial reports finally make sense. So please welcome Barbara L. Starley, CPA, to the Church Solutions Podcast. Barbara, how are you today?
I am doing great. Thanks so much for having me on, Phil.
All right, good. Well, you certainly have quite a history there, a resume, so to speak, in this bio. And so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, and again, we normally have tech stuff on, and yes, maybe you could say tech because now QuickBooks is online. But I have found, and I was in ministry for a long time. I'm basically a retired pastor, I guess, and part of that time of doing ministry, I was an executive pastor. And so I handled money. I handled the books. And I found over the years of helping multiple churches that was a weak area for many church leadership people. Finances, people go to seminary, go to Bible college. I went to all that stuff. They never had a course on finances where I went. Right. And so it's a weak area, and it's an area that needs attention. And as we were saying before we pressed record here on this, there are a lot of small churches out there that are struggling in this area, and even some large ones. And then you have also people that really don't know how to deal with finances because it's different when it comes to ministry stuff. And then you have even some of the larger ministries that have other people in charge. There may be business people or whatever, which, makes sense. Yeah, put a business people, but they don't always understand ministry. And so you have the pendulum swinging back and forth. So with that in mind, I think this is important. I hope that everybody will stay with us here. So you have seen QuickBooks evolved from the early 90s to the cloud today. And all those years, all those tech changes. What is the one financial principle for churches that has never changed?
Well, that they need to handle their finances with integrity and accountability. I think those two things kind of go hand in hand. Okay. And so, getting a handle on your finances and simplifying things makes everybody feel a lot more comfortable and confident in those numbers.
Yeah. So many pastors really do feel, there's a tension here, I think, between ministry and money. And one of the things when I first came on staff and as an executive pastor at the church, I I really held tight to the purses, the books and all that stuff. And part of the reason was that it was a small church, and I knew that if I didn't handle the money well, I wouldn't get paid. And so I wanted to make sure they handled the money well. But one of the things that my senior pastor told me one day, he goes, money is for ministry. He goes,
Okay.
so just really keep that in mind. You want to, God's given us money to do ministry. So
Yeah.
how do you help people with that, pastors, especially with this tension between ministry and money? How do you help them see that, accounting is a form of worship in a way? Accounting is a form of stewardship rather than just this administrative red tape stuff.
Yeah. I think the main thing is having them finally understand what their financial reports are trying to tell them. And when they can really understand, oh, I get why we are doing this, and we organize things in a way that makes sense to them, then kind of all the guardrails go down, or all the tension goes down, because it's like, oh, I get it. I'm not just looking at a sea of numbers on a piece of paper and not knowing what I do with that.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into some brass tacks here. So churches aren't, really your standard small businesses. I mean,
True.
there's business that has to happen. You got to have some business principles with your church, with your ministry. But what is the most common, I would call it rookie mistake or rookie mistakes that you have seen ministries make, especially when they first set up their books, like in QuickBooks, for instance?
Yeah, I would say the two biggest areas of confusion are clergy payroll. It's a whole different animal compared to, being paid as an employee, like you said, in a for-profit organization.
Right.
And then the other thing is how to handle designated and restricted funds designated by a donor. Like if a donor says, I want you to use it for this purpose, how do we account for that? How do we manage that? How do we understand that? And then how do we make sure that we're not misappropriating those funds?
And that brings up something, because I remember a lot of this when I was doing the books and stuff. If a donor designates something for a specific project, do you as a church legally have to, follow that? I mean, because I think at one point in ministry stuff I was doing, we had kind of a disclaimer, and that was, and maybe this wasn't right, I don't know, but you can tell me, but we had a little disclaimer saying, funds that you might as a donor designate to a specific project, as a church, we reserve the right to use that money in a different avenue if so be it, or if we need it. I mean, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally do. And I've heard that question before.
Yeah.
What I like to say is it would be better not to accept the donor, the designation from the donor, or not to accept that money, rather than saying, I might not use it the way you told me to use it, because I feel it's an integrity issue. So,
okay. Yeah.
But I do a quick story. One of the very first churches that I worked with, they had brand new church, needed the money. Someone walked in with a check for $10,000 and said, I want you to use this for the youth ministry to buy music equipment. Mm-hmm. And the executive pastor, very, very smart guy, he said, we really appreciate your generosity, but I can't accept this donation with that designation. We already have a budget set. We have money that in our budget, we have money set aside for youth music equipment. And, it's not going to be $10,000, but we're not going to add $10,000 to it either. Mm. And so, when you give to the general fund, you're allowing us to have the money to use for the things that we think are appropriate. And the board is trying to be really good stewards of the money that we've been given. And that donor had a choice. He could either take that designation off of his check, and the church wouldn't get the money, or he could say, you know what, I trust the leadership of the church, and I'm going to give it to the general fund. And he set a precedent that day, honestly, that executive pastor, right? He says, we're not going to be told how to spend our money, because if everybody has their own special interest, pretty soon there's not enough money left over for the general fund. Yeah. But from an integrity standpoint, I think it's, if you accept the money, then I think you owe it to the donor to spend the money the way they suggested.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I don't think I never did that. I mean, I never took the money and used it for something else
Sure,
that,
sure.
but I just wonder, I just remember
Yeah,
thinking about that. Well, what if we needed it for something else? Another option might be to go to that person down the road a ways and say, hey, look, we're in a situation here where your donation you gave us for this thing might be better used over here. That might be
correct.
another option, right? To ask,
Absolutely,
you know,
absolutely. You can always go back to you, and that's why we have to keep really good records of who gave us that money
right,
in
right.
order to get that permission to basically release the designation, and
Yeah,
preferably
yeah.
in writing because that's good. Just good accountability.
Sure, sure. All right. Let's go back to the rookie mistake thing. You mentioned the pastoral salaries. Tell us a little more about that. What's different about pastoral salaries compared to some other things?
Yeah, so a pastor is considered a dual status employee for purposes of payroll. So they are considered an employee for purposes of all the benefits and being on payroll. But from a Social Security and medical or Social Security and Medicare standpoint, they're considered self-employed. So I always kind of say it's kind of the IRS giveth and the IRS taketh away. So when the IRS said, we're going to let you as a pastor have a housing allowance completely federal income tax free, and in
Right,
most states, not all, but in most states also state income tax free, we're going to give you that. But in exchange, you are going to be responsible for SECA taxes, self-employment taxes, and you're going to pay both sides of Social Security and Medicare. And normally, an employee would have Social Security and Medicare withheld, and then the church would match that. So it's an interesting
yeah,
thing. But then there's always the question: well, are they W-2 people? Do they get a 1099? Because now we
right.
have two statuses, but they get a W-2. They just don't have any thing listed as Social Security wages or Social Security taxes or Medicare withheld, and nothing gets matched by the church.
That's interesting. See, I'm trying to go back. So I opted out. I took that. This is back in the
Mm,
early '90s. I opted out of whatever they called it back then. They called it
yeah,
the what was it? The I can't think of the term for
yeah.
it, but it was a conscientious objector or some kind of a
Yes,
thing,
yes, that's exactly. I was
right?
just going to say, yes, you say I'm
Yeah,
conscientiously opposed. What's
yeah,
interesting about that is not I'm conscientiously opposed to paying the taxes. What you're saying that you're conscientiously opposed to is the acceptance of the benefit from paying the taxes,
yeah,
which you're saying I'm conscientiously opposed to getting Social Security. I'm
yeah,
conscientiously opposed to getting Medicare.
yeah.
And that's what you're actually saying that you're conscientiously opposed
Right.
to.
Yeah, and I opted out of that. And now that I go back, if I were to go back and revisit that thing 40 years, I don't think I would have. I don't think. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah,
What's your advice on that?
I think it's a dangerous thing to opt out. First of all, it's interesting how many people, when they get to age 65 or now 67, depending on when you're born, or maybe even later, how all of a sudden they have this epiphany that, well, maybe I do want Medicare. And they
Right.
haven't been paying in for years, possibly
Yeah.
decades, if they made their mission a lifelong career.
Right.
And they're unpleasantly surprised if they did even qualify for collecting Social Security, how little that number
Right.
is because they had opted out.
Yeah. Well, the idea behind it, if I remember right, was you'll take that money that you would normally be paying into and save it and
Yeah,
invest it,
yeah,
in stocks and bonds. And I did very little of that. I started to. Now I was bivocational a lot of that time. I was full time half the time, but I was also bivocational. So I'm 68 now, and so I do collect Social Security and I
yeah.
do have
Right,
Medicare and
because you
all that stuff.
qualified for
Yeah.
the vocations that were paying into
Yeah,
it.
that we're
Correct.
paying for it
Yeah,
into it. But I didn't really. I did start saving some money when it first started, but
yeah,
then something happened. Kids came along, and
yep.
houses came along, and all that stuff. So interesting
And
stuff.
that's a very, very common mistake
Yeah,
because the
yeah,
idea is, well, if I put that same 15% away, I'm going to end up with a much bigger nest egg, but at the end of the day, it's so easy to let everything else interfere with that. I'm
yep,
going to do it kind of a thing. It's kind of
yep.
the the conversation we have with term versus whole life
Sure.
insurance. It's like, well, yeah, as
Yep.
long as you're putting that stuff away, right? So
Yep.
that money away. So yeah, unfortunately, it's a tough thing to
Yeah.
maintain, if on your own, at least.
Can you reverse it? There may be some people listening right now and saying, "Yeah, I opted out of this thing, but now I want to go back." Is there a way to reverse that?
Well, there was a time where the IRS said, we're going to have this small window of opportunity for you to opt back in, and then they've been talking about that. But as of right now, I do not believe that. I believe it's a discussion point with the IRS, but I don't believe it's available right now.
Okay, interesting. All right. So let's talk about financial reports here. Something really exciting. So, what are the three most important financial reports, at least off the top of your head, that
Sure.
that ministry should look at every month to understand the health of their ministry?
Well, the first one is always your balance sheet, which is interesting because so many boards don't even look at a balance sheet. They don't know what it is or what it's supposed to tell them. The second is the statement of activity or your profit and loss statement. And then the budget versus actual, which of course the actual is pulling off the statement of activity. So the idea with the balance sheet is that you got assets, liabilities, and equity. Assets are what you own. Liabilities are what you owe, and equity is the difference between the two. And the idea is, if we have money in the bank, how much of that is earmarked for donors, right? That donors have told us what to do with that money that we really can't spend. And then, and any other liabilities. And then the statement of activity or profit and loss. How much money have we brought in? How have we spent the money? I have like 7 major categories. So I love to collapse that report so you're not looking at a sea of numbers and say, we're spending X% in these areas. And then the budget versus actually. How are we doing compared to what we expected to do? I think is really important. And so, those 3 reports end up telling a big story behind what's happening in the church.
I think I used to do year to date too. I used to do like, here's what we did in 2018 and here's what we did now in 2019, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. The comparison, that's off of the statement of activity for sure. You can do compared to last year. You can do compared to like you said, this month compared to year to date. There's so many ways to slice and dice it. Yeah. And obviously I'm a QuickBooks expert, but and a lot of people don't think QuickBooks should ever be used for a church. But honestly, it's such a easy system to use and understand. But setup is all in the setup. You got to have the setup right.
You got to have it set up correctly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I used to use it years ago. And this is probably not in your wheelhouse, but for a church that, is kind of operating in the red, what are some tips, this may not be your thing, but I'll throw it out there anyhow, because you may have run across it. But if a church is in the red, what advice would you give them?
I would just say that I think communication is key. I think sometimes we just kind of let the finances go kind of by the wayside. It's something we deal with behind closed doors as a church. And I think having kind of a state of the church address at the beginning of the year to say, this is what we did last year. Again, big picture stuff, nothing in the detail generally. I know some denominations, they have like congregational meetings that they go really into the deep details, but I don't think that's really necessary. I think it's saying we are being good stewards, but we're falling behind on our budget, right? I think if they're in the red. So I believe that communication is everything. Mm-hmm. Communication is everything with the congregation to let them know. And so they know that what you're doing to be good stewards, and then also what you need to maintain and be able to do the things that they want to have done. Because at the end of the day, you're serving the congregation.
Right. Yeah. It's all about the people. Let's talk a little bit about some technical stuff here. So you've been around for a while with all this stuff. How has the shift to the digital giving and the modern Fintech, I guess that's what you call it. I had to look that up. What is Fintech? And I realized, that's financial tech. It's whatever short for financial tech. But anyhow, the question here is the shift that you have seen from digital giving. Now, how does that change the way churches need to handle their bookkeeping compared to the old, just pass the plate, that kind of
Right.
a thing?
Yeah. So this is, I mean, actually, the online giving is really an exciting opportunity for
Yeah.
churches, I think, because it gives the donor the opportunity to just make a recurring payment. So when they're not sitting in a pew, they are still giving to the churches that they know and love. I think that in terms of recording, it takes a lot of pressure off takes a lot of pressure off the church bookkeeper to maintain those records, because that can be done right within inside the online giving. And so as the shift happens, it kind of was like, okay, but we still get most of our money, through the plate or the box in the back of the church. But that's changing, right?
Yes.
There's so much now going online that whole thing, that laborious task of donor statements at the end of the year goes away, because I can click on my phone and find out what my giving statement was.
Yeah.
So,
That really, it makes a big difference. Going back so many years, I remember the old days where it was pretty much check and cash,
right.
and that was a challenge at times. And I remember we had a gal, this one church I started to work with, and she handled our books. And God bless her, she was a sweet lady, and but she was starting to lose it a little bit. And there was at one point where we had a dumpster behind the church, and somehow or another, somebody, I don't know if it was a homeless person or what, found a bunch of checks that people had given us, but somehow or another got tossed in the dumpster. And I don't know how the person found him, but he or she, whoever it was really nice to bring them in and go, I think you guys want these checks.
Yeah, interesting you should say that, because the church that I attended had their giving box just like outside the door. And so whether you were coming in or going out, you could just drop your check in there, because they didn't pass a plate. And one day after service, that box was gone. And and so again, from an online giving standpoint, you eliminate a lot of that potential embezzlement, right? You theft, all of that kind of stuff. So a lot of that, those concerns are kind of taken away, because that online giving can replace all of that losses. You pay a little bit, obviously, to have them process things, but at the end of the day, how long does it take somebody to record the check? How long does it take them to do the donor statements at the end of the year? What if that check bounces? Now you got a fee. How are you going to deal with all that? It eliminates all that.
Yeah.
So,
do you have a recommendation of because there's several out there now? I mean, back in the old days, we used PayPal. I sound like an old cranky guy. We used to use PayPal. We thought we were cutting edge. But people could still use PayPal.
Sure.
But what other options are there out there? What do you like?
Yeah. So obviously PayPal is an option. I don't think they're geared for the church communities per se. So they're not going to have some of the benefits of being able to do donor statements, that type of thing. Small churches, I love Tithely, tithe.ly, Tithely. Larger churches, most of my clients are using PushPay, PushPay through like their app, through their website. So you're getting and there's many others. I don't want to not say that there aren't others out there, but I think that those are the two biggies that I see. Tithely being very affordable for a small church, and then wrapping everything into one package for the larger churches can be really nice.
What is it, about 2 or 3%? I mean, do you remember?
Generally, and I think the better companies, and this is a good thing to think about, is that if people are giving ACH, there's usually at a smaller percentage, maybe around 1%. If they're using a credit card, it's going to be closer to 3% or somewhere around the 3% range. So encouraging people to give that way is a good idea too. Saying, hey, you save us money. One thing that they can do, again, most of the online giving options will give you the ability to say, do you want to cover the fee? And some people, but I will say, I had one church that they just said, you're covering the fee, period. And I wasn't sure I really liked that idea,
You will
because I
pay.
kind of felt like that should be my option. To me, that's an operating expense. You're
Yes.
saving all this money on not having a person have to do this. And if I choose to do that, that's one thing. But so I would just say make that an optional thing. And a lot of people do. A lot of people click that button anyway. But forcing it, I was kind of like, I'm not sure I like that one.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point because, the online thing, the alternative of somebody having to count the money and do this and file this and stuff. I mean, it takes time. You got to pay them usually, or even if it's a volunteer, it still takes time, and there's always human error that can happen. So I think that's a good idea. All right, so we're starting to run out of time here, but I want to talk about Good Steward Church Academy. That's you, right? And what was that light bulb moment when you decided, I want to start this Good Steward Church Academy? And what is it? Tell us about it.
So back in 2017, there was a small church here in Casa Grande, Arizona, and they called an auditor. Their board was really upset. They said, we need an audit. These books don't make any sense. We can't understand our numbers. Something has to be wrong. Yeah. The auditor looked at the books and they said, you don't need an audit. You need your books fixed. Call Barbara. So I went in, I helped them. It only took a few hours to reorganize their setup, trained the person on site, and she gave the reports to the pastor and the board the next day, and they were like, this is what we've been waiting for, right? Well, it was on the way home that day that I said, I wonder if all small churches are this messed up. And it was like a download. And I was like, I wonder how I could serve churches. And I got the name. You are going to create Good Steward Church Academy. Okay. And what exactly will I do in Good Steward Church Academy? And I heard you are going to train bookkeepers, pastors, and treasurers to honor God with their church finances. Okay, that was fairly clear.
Yeah.
I went home and mentioned it to my husband. He goes, that's perfect for you. Like, okay, confirmation. And so I started it's a membership organization. We do weekly training calls. And I have a library with probably 400 hours, totally searchable library on the topics like clergy payroll, like budgeting, that people can go, that our members can go in and get access to. I'm going to start doing pay. If you're not a member, not everybody wants to become a member and do a weekly call, but I'm going to be doing one-off trainings on things like clergy payroll, not only from the church perspective, but from the pastor perspective, budgeting, those kinds of things. And I just love to train. I love to empower. My heart is happy when people say, I finally get it. This is so much easier than I thought it was going to be. I finally have my own, I finally can make good decisions. That's what makes my heart happy.
Wow. And now you just said something. Casa Grande, are you in Casa Grande, Arizona?
I'm in Arizona. I'm in South Chandler, Sun Lakes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we're in Tucson.
Yeah. Nice. I love that.
Yeah.
We're
cool.
neighbors.
All right. Yeah, there we are. Absolutely. All right. So, that's cool. Let me ask you a quick question. Do you ever get this question? Because we did a podcast years ago, probably 15, 16 years ago, and we talked about pastoral salaries. Mm-hmm. And what should your pastor make? Do you get boards asking you, what do you think we should pay our pastor? Do you get that question?
I do from time to time, not real often. There is a great resource offered through the church network that you can actually put information in about the size of your church and get back feedback on what would be, comparable salaries. Mm-hmm.
Is there a formula or something that there's probably a lot of different factors that enter in.
Yeah, there probably is. I will say, just as a budget line item, personnel, and I'm talking about compensation, taxes, benefits, everything. That number really should be around 45% of the income. So if you kind of have to look at, and I say spendable income, because if you have a parent organization that you tithe to, that's coming off the top. So it's kind of like what's left over. and then having a 45% mark for all payroll, not just clergy.
For
It's
everybody, yeah. So it's not just the senior pastor, but it's
Correct.
that's interesting stat. Okay, yeah. All right. So, all right. Well, look. How do people get a hold of you if they're interested in this? Good Steward,
Thanks.
Good
Yeah.
Steward. I'm messing your name up. Good
Good
Steward Church Academy, right?
Yeah, Good Steward Church Academy.com.
Yeah. All right.
There's a website out there that'll just kind of tell them what I do and the history, the little story that I told you about the person in Casa Grande, the expanded version of that's on there. There's a contact me page there. There's a phone number there. So yeah, goodstewardchurchacademy.com.
Okay. And then your fees, I mean, you got, I don't know, there's probably different fees depending on what you do, right?
Sure. So the academy actually is really affordable. It's $500 for an entire year, or $50 a month if you want to go monthly. Obviously, you save 2 months if you go the annual route. So that's being a good steward. And then if they want me just as their CPA, then we have a book time with me button on there as well. So.
Okay. All right. Good deal. All right, folks. Well, Barbara L. Starley has been our guest today on the Church Solutions podcast. And Barbara, thank you so much for sharing this information with us. I find this stuff very interesting, and I hope that other people listening here will also take it. Yeah.
I hope so as well. Thank you so much for letting me be on your podcast. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Stick around for a moment or so. Folks, if you have not subscribed to the Church Solutions podcast, give it a shot. You can always subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Just do a search for Church Solutions podcast, and we've got lots of good information for you, a lot of technical stuff, but we do get off on different topics from time to time besides tech stuff, and this is one of them, and I think it's very helpful, and I hope that it will help our listeners and our viewers. So with that in mind, Steve Lacey will join us again in the near future. My name is Phil Thompson. Please take care of yourself and each other, and we will catch you again on another episode of the Church Solutions Podcast.